Hi and welcome back. This is video number 2 for week number 9. And in this video, we're going to be focusing on outlining. I will tell you the truth. For a very long time, I thought that outlining was a huge waste of time. And I would actually skip that step when I was writing. So I'd be, all ready to go. I would do my research and I would just sit down and start writing and not actually work through an outline. I have learned over time that outlining really is not a waste of time. It's actually a huge part of the process, and it really improves your end output. So the stronger your outline is, you'll find the stronger your actual final paper is. It's also very good if you're someone like me that tends to bounce around very quickly from idea to idea. It actually sort of restrains you because it keeps you on task. It keeps you focused, and it keeps you organized. It actually operates just like a little skeleton, okay? So if the thesis statement is the heart of your paper, like we said last video, the outline is your skeleton, okay? If you think about the human body, if somebody sucked your skeleton out, you'd just be a little pile of skin and fat and some floppy organs all flopping around. There'd be no actual structure to your body. Right? You wouldn't be able to stand up. You wouldn't be able to walk. You'd just be like a little pile of guts on the floor. Your skeleton is what everything hangs on, right? And it supports everything. You can't see your skeleton, right? Unless you x-ray or whatever. The skeleton stays hidden within your body, but it provides the support for all the exterior stuff. An outline is the same thing, okay? No one will ever see it because they're going to look at your final draft, the final paper, but it's in there hidden, okay? And it's what provides the support for the longer paper. It really is a necessary step, and it's so necessary that I'm actually going to force you to create an outline for this paper project that we're starting to work on. When we talk about outlining, there's various ways, okay, to do this. The readings that I ask you to complete show one way, okay? But there are lots of other styles. And in fact, if you Google, right, essay outlines, there are tons of resources on the web about how to do outlining. There's various styles. Different styles work for different people. Okay? They all accomplish the same goal, though, which is to provide structure for an essay. No matter what style you choose, though, okay, an outline should always be point form, except for your thesis, your topic sentences, and your closing remark. Okay, don't try to do too much at the outlining stage. Remember, all you're doing is sort of mapping stuff out. You're not actually writing at this stage. The only full sentences that you need is your thesis statement, your topic sentences, and your closing remark. And I'll go over each of these things with you. Okay. The idea behind the outline is to actually build an essay without actually doing the writing. Okay, so you're working on like the architecture of the paper before you actually sit down and start writing it. Okay, so you're building the organization and the structure. There's different outline parts. Okay, so in an outline, you always have a little part where you're going to outline your introduction. And this is where you want to have your working thesis statement written down. In the last video, at the end of the last video, I asked you to take half an hour or so and actually come up with a draft thesis statement. So you already have this part done. Okay. In your body, then what you want to do is you want to have a topic sentence that's written for each planned paragraph. And each category or each pattern that you identified is going to have its own little body paragraph. Okay, those correspond back to the thesis statement. I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, you also want to include the detail or the proof, if you want to use that word, that you're going to be using in each of those paragraphs in point form. Okay, and you also want to keep track of where that information is coming from. So you want to use your in-text citations, even though you're not writing sentences or anything at this point, because it makes things much easier later. You then don't have to go back and flip through to try to remember where you found certain points or where you found certain ideas. They'll all be in your outline and ready to go. And then in your conclusion, you're going to have something called your final thought. okay, written down, and I'll cover what a final thought is. But these are the 3 parts. So you have a little section where you're planning out your introduction, a bigger section where you're actually planning out the body of your essay, and then another smaller section where you're planning out the conclusion. So what does an outline look like? I'm going to ask you to take a look. I've put an example for you up under course documents, and it's going to show the various parts. And I'm just going to open up that particular file so we can take a look at it. So the first step that I'm going to go through is I'm going to move from my thesis statement, and I'm going to craft my topic sentences so that I have those ready for my outline. And I've made up a disease here. I'm calling it Blois syndrome. Okay, and here's my thesis statement. Blois syndrome can be treated with a combination of physical interventions, psychological therapies, and self-care methods. And I put each of these in a different color because these are my 3 different patterns that I discovered as I looked through my research. Then I'm going to take this, okay, and I'm going to take each of the patterns that I've identified, and I'm going to write a topic sentence for them. And if you remember from the readings that I asked you to do, a topic sentence is the first sentence that's going to appear in your body paragraph, and it is just like it sounds. It announces the topic of the paragraph. It should really be very basic and to the point, okay? So it introduces each of the patterns that you're going to talk about. So I've taken the first one, physical interventions, and I've come up with a topic sentence here. Physical interventions are the gold standard in treating Blois syndrome. Then I have my in-text citation there. Then I go to my next one, psychological therapies, and I write a topic sentence for that. Self-care methods, same thing. I come up with a topic sentence. So from this plan, then I would have 3 body paragraphs, okay, for the eventual essay that I'm going to work on. Once I've done that, then I actually move to the outline itself, okay, and I've given you sort of a sample, okay, of what an essay outline might look like for an essay of the style that we're doing. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a title, okay, and again, I don't have to keep this title, but it helps me, again, stay on track. And I gave mine a very basic title, Symptoms of Blois Syndrome. I then include my working thesis statement, okay? And you'll see that my thesis statement follows that same formula that we've been talking about. Although Blois syndrome can manifest in a number of different ways, 3 key symptoms are present in every case. Then I go into my patterns: an intense craving for chocolate, the inability to get off the couch, and overconsumption of refined carbohydrates. So if I were truly doing this outline, I would have a section for chocolate, a section for the inability to get off the couch, and a section for consuming refined carbohydrates. I've written out a topic sentence for each of these, okay? The only one I've mapped out for you here, though, is the first one, an intense craving for chocolate. So then in my outline, I move down and I plan out my body paragraph number 1. First thing I do, I write out my topic sentence in full sentence format. And again, my topic sentence is very basic and to the point. An insatiable craving for chocolate is a universal symptom of Blois. Okay, then I get into the nitty-gritty, okay? And this is where I'm going to map out all of the pieces of information that I found in my research that connect to that symptom of chocolate craving. So I go through, okay, I flip through and I find all the different mentions of chocolate craving and I throw it in point form into my outline. I don't want to bother with writing full sentences here, okay? Remember, I'm going to have time for that later. All I'm doing is mapping out. So I use points. I use point form, okay, and I do point. You'll see as well when you look through this, I'm also including my in-text citations because I want to know where all of this is coming from. And I'm focusing, okay, so that I'm careful about academic honesty. I'm focusing on paraphrasing here as I'm doing my points rather than copying word for word, okay? Because remember, if I copy word for word, I'm going to get into that scary territory. If I find something that is really perfect word for word, and I want to use it, what I'm going to do when I'm doing my various points is I'm going to put in my quotation marks so that I remember that I've copied this word for word. And I'm also going to make sure that I jot down the page number in my in-text citation so that if I decide to use that quotation in my paper, I have all of the information there. And I'm going to repeat this process for each of the body paragraphs that I'm planning. So I would do one for craving for chocolate, which I've done. I'd then go on and do one for the second pattern and go on and do one for the third paragraph. For your particular essay, I'm asking you to do this for a minimum of 3 paragraphs. Okay, you can go to 4. 5 is getting a little long. I probably wouldn't recommend 5 body paragraphs because we're really going to be ending up with sort of a mini essay as opposed to a super long essay, but minimum 3. Okay. Once I'm done, then I'm going to start thinking about my conclusion. And I don't know about you, but I always find when I'm writing an essay, one of the most difficult parts is coming up with that last sentence that I'm going to have in my essay that brings things to a close. And some people call this a memorable statement. Some people call it a concluding statement. There's different names for it. But I always like to think of it like the Jerry Springer final thought. Right? I know everyone has watched at least one episode of Jerry Springer. And on the Jerry Springer show, what they do is they have all sorts of ridiculous things going on, people fighting with one another and screaming at one another and crying and all the rest of it and all sorts of crazy stuff. But at the end, Jerry Springer comes out and he gives what he calls his final thought. And he makes some kind of statement, right, that's philosophical in nature. So he might say something like, people should learn to love one another or something like that. That's his way of signaling that the show is over. And it's his way of reflecting philosophically on what has just passed. You're going to do the exact same thing with an essay. I know it seems silly to think of, a talk show and an essay being similar, but that's actually what you're doing when it comes to your final line. You're going to make some kind of philosophical statement that's going to identify to people that you're bringing this essay to a close. Okay, so there's a couple of techniques that you can use. You can come up with a question for future research. You can make, again, some kind of philosophical statement. You can make an emotional appeal if that works for you. The example I provided here, right, is one that sort of provides a little bit of hope. Okay, so while Blah syndrome is a serious condition that Canadians must watch for, most patients with correct guidance and support from their healthcare team can manage their symptoms. Okay, nice statement. Gives the idea that everything's coming to a close. Again, remember, we're just at the planning stages now. So there's no rule that says that you're actually going to have to use this sentence or any of this stuff, okay, in your actual final draft. But it at least gives you some direction about where to go, okay? So again, an outline always has a working essay title, a working thesis statement, and then for the number of patterns or planned paragraphs, a topic sentence for each, and then the detail that a person is planning to use. The last part is a little bit for your conclusion, your memorable, or your concluding statement. I'm going to be asking you to do each of these things in our assignment. You're actually going to be outlining based on the material that you've gathered for your research file to prepare to write an essay. Okay, I'm not picky about format or anything like that. Again, if you look at other styles and think that another style of outline would work better for you, you're free to do that. In our next video, though, I'm going to go over the assignment and the various things that I'm going to be looking at as I'm grading the assignment. But it really is up to you, okay, in terms of the actual structure that you want to come up with for your outline. Okay, so in our next video, I'll introduce the assignment. I'll talk to you then.